Our next contributor is the Competition Commission of Pakistan. Madam Chair of the Competition Commission, Ms. Rahat Hassan, was appointed as the chairperson of the Competition Commission last July. She has over 25 years of experience in private and public sector. Unfortunately, she can't make it today due to last-minute engagements. Mr. Ahmed QADIR, Director General of the Competition Commission, will replace her. Mr. QADIR, you have the floor.
Thank you so much to all our colleagues, and especially UNCTAD and the Turkish Competition Authority. All the presentations that have gone before have just led me to believe that we are all, regardless of where we're coming from and where we are located on this planet, we are all in the pursuit of something fair and just for the sake of economic development. I just have a few slides that I would like to share with you, and I'll just like to take it forward from here. Competition issues in digital markets, Pakistan's experience. Well, just a quick look at the numbers. There are about 169 million cellular subscribers, and we have a population that's estimated around 212 million. So around 40% of 3G, 4G penetration and 40% of broadband penetrations, 80% teledensity, and the access to internet grows on an average of 23% every year. So given these numbers, Pakistan has been moving towards putting in a legal framework that encourages the digital markets and the digital concept. So the digital policy was released in 2017 to help move or accelerate the digitalization ecosystem, especially focusing on key sectors like agriculture, health, energy, commerce, e-commerce especially, and justice, and moving Pakistan towards artificial intelligence and fintech regimes, and perhaps in the long term robotics. Last year, in October 2019, the National E-commerce Policy Framework was passed, and that envisions empowering stakeholders with a reliable infrastructure to undertake e-commerce transactions, and more importantly, to allow and help our small and medium enterprises and disadvantaged groups, disadvantaged in the sense that they're located in areas that are very rural and do not have access to big markets and major urban centers, to allow them to transact and acquire goods and services at affordable prices. And the policy aims to promote a culture of e-commerce in the country that also looks at electronic business transactions, especially in the financial sector. Today's economic environment in Pakistan is quite different from what it was when the Commission started working about 13 years ago. The technology is different. Everything's happening on mobile phones. Marketing channels have shifted to Facebook, Instagram, Amazon, and business models are also reflecting a change and incorporating more of a digital aspect in how they operate. Much of this has been fueled by the growth of 3G and 4G telecom services that were launched in 2013 and 14, and apps and algorithms are playing a substantial role in the markets. Terminology such as multi-sided markets, platforms, sharing economy, now they're all becoming, rather than moving from buzzwords and jargon, they're becoming sort of standard terminology these days. And although slowly, payment mechanisms are also reflecting a change. And if you look at the figures over the last 3-4 years, we see e-commerce sales have really boomed, especially this year because of COVID-19, because of markets and shops were closed and put under lockdown restrictions. So a lot of business activity shifted to the online environment, and reflecting e-commerce sales increase, the digital payment mechanism has also seen an uptake. It's still very much driven by cash on delivery, but we're seeing a change as moving towards branchless banking, mobile wallets, and other electronic-based transactions and fintech provided services. So slowly and gradually, the change is happening. This change is not just reflected to business models, but for example, the nature of competition itself we see in Pakistan is changing. So banks are not only competing with other banks, but telecom companies are providing similar services in banks. So who is the competitor now? Is it another bank or is it a telecom company? Ride-sharing services are competing with established forms of transportation. There's retail versus online competition. And then there's a new aspect of the collaborative economy in which the definition of a consumer is changing. So the implications for having sensible regulation, as President Kiritou said, we want to have tech companies, we want the services that they provide, but we do want them to be regulated carefully in a manner that allows consumer protection and competition issues not to be violated. So that's a critical challenge for Pakistan also. And in the collaborative economy, consumers, there's a fluid definition of consumers. So they both purchase and provide services. And thus a consumer could both either be a victim of competition or a consumer protection violation, or could be the cause. In this case, how do you define an undertaking? So if it's a ride sharing or an Airbnb, does that individual come under the normal definition of an undertaking? So these are questions that Pakistan is now starting to look at. How can business models and consumer protection regimes incorporate the collaborative economy, and where does the responsibility lie, and what are the best practices that we can refer to, and how does international cooperation help Pakistan and other countries adapt to these changes? Challenges for the Competition Commission of Pakistan: there are more transactions moving online. We are seeing data-driven mergers and acquisitions. And in such acquisitions and mergers, what is the relevant market? Is it the market for attention? Is it the market for consumer data, etc.? The existing legal framework does not really look and incorporate the changing virtual role, the virtual and online marketplaces and the role they play in people's lives. The role of tech giants, I think Facebook, Amazon, Google, these are all global giants, and they have a substantial footprint in Pakistan also. And the recent antitrust action against Facebook and Google, being started in America and Europe, of course, they will have substantial and serious local implications as to how these companies operate in Pakistan. So we are monitoring and observing what's happening internationally, and a lot of guidelines as to how we put in place our regulation will be driven from the findings of Western jurisdictions. Competition concerns. So now we have competition law that's meant with more physical competition, but now is it really designed to look at things that happen with clicks and on online portals and platforms? Can online transaction competitors or moving online, will this allow sensitive information to be exchanged between competitors? For example, we've heard about price comparison websites and how algorithms tend to reflect prices and change and adapt accordingly. So that could be cartel-like behavior, but it's very difficult to prove if it happens automatically. In terms of abuse of dominance, can individual companies be excluded from virtual marketplaces? And can the concentration of buyer or seller power result in competition distortions and exclusionary or exploitative conduct? In 2017, the EU sector study on e-commerce was quite informative. At least it gave us some ideas as to some of the things that we should look at. The study found that algorithms help more than half of competitors, track their prices vis-a-vis other e-commerce undertakings, and almost 80% of retailers track and adjust their own prices with those of their competitors. So that's pretty much a lot of market facilitation or capture or collusive behavior happening all automatically and happening in real time. And second, manufacturers tend to control online distribution of their products, and some of this control can border on anti-competitive conduct. So when does it require a rule of reason, and when is it a per se violation of competition law? These are things that have to be evaluated very, very carefully. Abuse of dominance against consumers can happen much more easily in digital markets, for example, based on geolocation or provinces or the affluent nature of individual buyers, and there's big data being collected on purchase histories, then that might result in different prices being quoted to different buyers based on the information that these big tech companies and e-commerce platforms have acquired, and then can use it to distort or impose unfair terms and conditions on different categories of buyers. There was an interesting case from 2012. One of the online travel websites, I think it was Orbitz, was charging a higher price to those who logged into the website using Mac computers, because Mac computer users had a much higher level of income than those who used Windows. So that was an interesting form of discrimination that went back to 2012. Pakistan also has seen a rising number of consumer protection concerns, especially this year because of COVID-19. And we have 4 provinces and Islamabad, the Federal Capital Territory. So there are 5 different consumer protection laws. But despite these provincial laws, consumers do not know what their rights are. in terms of consumer protection. And these rights all differ in these acts and laws that we have. The process of getting relief from a consumer complaint is very time consuming, expensive in terms of, you have to go to court and, get legal recourse, etc. One of the critical shortages or lack that Pakistan has, is there's no federal level agency that's designated for consumer protection. And this is something that we are trying to lobby our government for. And we feel that a thorough revamp of consumer protection laws is very, very important now to encompass the growing role of the digital economy, especially as in 2020, we've seen a lot of routine transactions move online. So the consumer protection powers of the Commission, well, we only can look at deceptive marketing practices, any misrepresentation of information that can result in a commercial transaction. And part of that includes looking at intellectual property infringements of false use of trademarks, labeling, or packaging that can encourage a wrong transaction. So the Commission has acted in the past and continues to do so. Coming to data concerns, I think Pakistan is no different. The concept of data protection has become paramount, especially in the last 2 years. And now with a lot of people shifting online due to COVID, personal data protection has become a big imperative. So we've been looking at the EU's General Data Protection Regulation that came out in 2018. And it's not just the EU. We noticed that states in America, they are passing their own versions of consumer privacy acts. And what are the implications that these will have in for a country like mine? Our own Ministry of Information and Technology and Telecommunication has introduced a personal data protection bill in July 2018. This is going through the consultative process, and I believe the last draft is now being sent to our federal cabinet for final approval. So we hope that in January 2021, Pakistan puts into place a strong personal data protection framework. The data protection is necessary, in fact, imperative for a digital economy because it protects our citizens from unnecessary data collection and misuse. Not having a data protection regime could act as a barrier to entry because companies based in Europe, because of GDPR requirements, may not want to have e-commerce transactions with Pakistan or with a country that does not have a legal framework that provides their consumers with the same level of protection that they have. And a lack of data protection could lead to insecurity, for example, and in conducting e-commerce transactions. And if there's that hesitation, innovation and competition could be stifled. So Careem, which is our equivalent of Uber, has suffered a data hack in 2018, which affected 14 million users. But because there was no data protection bill, no punitive action or no legal recourse was available to any one of these 14 million people who were affected. So that's a major gap that we find in our legal ecosystem. To quickly conclude, I think global e-commerce platforms that now that we're seeing happening all over the world require that we must exchange experiences. And I once again want to thank the Turkish Competition Authority for putting together this peer review and exchange of information session, and we hope that this will continue. Market entry barriers, how are they eliminated? What is the role of personal data protection? What is the role of regulation, etc.? How do we provide an adequate level of security and trust to customers? And as we go into the next year, it's very important to look at the convergence of regulations and how regulatory bodies, I'm sure most countries have different regulators, competition, consumer protection, and data protection. So how do we manage to get different regulatory bodies together and work for a common cause of promoting competition and promoting trust in the digital market? As I close, I was just looking at, as the session began last week, the OECD's Global Forum on Competition began, and one of the first sessions on competition reset, they were having this online survey, and 70% of the people, and this is just about an hour back when I looked at the survey result, and 70% of the people who responded to that survey said that new tech regulations are necessary if we are to have strong trust in our digital economy. So I hope that this forum and other forums with the assistance of UNCTAD, the EU, etc., we can sort of put together a very good regulatory forum that protects competition, protects consumers, and addresses issues of data protection. I close with my thanks to the Turkish Competition Authority and UNCTAD and everybody else who has spoken before me. I've certainly learned a lot. So my thanks to all of you.
Thank you, Mr. QADIR, for this valuable presentation, which not only gave us insights from the Pakistan economy, not only from the competition perspective, but also as a picture of what's going on in Pakistan and the legal framework. So thank you very much indeed, and we indeed look forward to working with you on the peer review in upcoming months.